And hi, everybody. Welcome to class. Looks like I'm flying solo this evening, and it's Monday, January 21st. So tonight is scheduled for the Q&A, and um, and we've got some good questions that I covered a little bit on Facebook, and so I'll review those. And also tonight's kind of the wrap up of the first 2 week segment. So the first thing to remember is by Wednesday, and I'm not a stickler for deadlines, but technically tomorrow, turn in your spreadsheet server project for the winery cost of goods for your $25 red wine blend. And remember, I'm not so much interested in what the exact numbers look like. I want you to go in and play with things and try different scenarios and familiarize yourself in according to the level that you are in the wine business and in wine studies and so forth, and go through the program and see the kind of drivers, what makes a difference, how much difference does it make, that kind of stuff. So very quickly, to save a project and to turn it in, if we go to our winery cost of goods workbook, and you're basically going to go to your project, and then when you hit save, it will allow you to save it as a PDF. So just simply save it to your computer and remember where you saved it to, and then email that to me, and I will record that you have completed the project, okay? As is typical, and sometimes this is a little bit exacerbated in the beginning of the year, you've got up to 4 weeks beyond the formal end of the course to turn in all of your work. So if you've gotten behind, or if you've gotten, things that occur with life and jobs and family and business and health, don't panic. Just let me know that you're going to be late with it, and we can accommodate that. Okay. So again, it's not really heavy lifting. The workbook's pretty much filled out. But again, go in and see. Now, for anybody who's this is a little bit too rudimentary, open a new project and see what it's like to make 5,000 cases of a much more expensive wine. It looks like I'm getting a lot of lag, so I'm actually gonna turn my video off, and we'll just run with full screen here. Okay, so go in, play to your heart's content. You can create new projects. Remember that if you go back in and create a new project, that you want to bookmark the URL and save it just like you did. And again, a best practice is I've got a folder where I keep my projects in my favorites. Okay, all right. So if there's any questions, you can also ask on the Facebook discussion page, or just email me directly if you have an issue. All right. So this will be project 1, and there we go. All right. So the other thing is I want to make sure everybody got a chance to go through all of these. And we're probably going to be, for the next class, making the Great Purchase Agreement a required reading. It's so full of good information, and it allows you to look at all of the considerations between the grower and the buyer, and how the contracts are bounded. Let me go ahead and just open this up real cool or large for just a second. Hang on just a second. Let me get rid of this tool pane. Okay. So and sometimes the deal is just a handshake, but in most cases, you know, people want to secure a source for their main ingredient, and the importance of a contract cannot be overemphasized. And so what this goes through is all sorts of the terms, the pricing mechanisms, the viticultural practice, and it's not just the specification for the grapes. A lot of wineries and winemakers are very hands-on exactly how they want things farmed, when they want them picked, how they want them picked and delivered, all sorts of things for quality standards and dispute resolution. And then what happens if there is natural disaster or storms or hail or those kind of things. And then after a single year, if it's just a 1-year contract, then it's fairly easy. It's just done at the end of the year. But if it's indeed reasonable quality grapes or something you might really, really depend on long term, you will need to protect your source, and you'll need to have that handled in terms of your grape contract. Okay, so so really, really recommend that everyone goes into this, and especially any aspiring MW and WSET students, because it gives you the ability to see how to address an essay paper that may come up about grapes, grape sources, contracts, and so forth. Okay, so make sure to do that. All right. And then I haven't seen anybody doing the grape research project on the Facebook page. We'll double check that in a minute. And there we go. So on Wednesday, we're going to work on a new financial cost of goods workbook, but it'll be for bulk wines or for blending wines in a winery. And so we'll kind of shift gears and be looking at different winery models, things like custom crush facilities and the bulk wine business, and alternating proprietorships, estate winery models, that kind of stuff. Okay, so we'll wrap this up, and on Wednesday we'll open the new lessons section on Napa Valley Wine Academy, and we will get going on that. All right. Something to keep in the back of your mind as we're going on. Everybody, as you're aware, we've got a government shutdown, and a lot of people don't know how that impacts the wine business. And so I'm going to send out this article that was done on Wine Searcher just recently, because there are so many things from, you know, you've got a shipment prepared and you're waiting for certain documentation like label approval, or maybe you're starting a new winery, you're waiting for your permits, all sorts of things that get totally thrown asunder from something like this government shutdown. So this is also a good way to kind of go through and think about things that maybe, you know, you saw that there might be wine related things, but this is a well done article, and goes through a lot of the ramifications and what wineries are going through right now with the government limbo and the status of getting work done. Okay, so we'll go through that. All right. So to go to the Q&A section, let's go ahead and we're going to go to, let me actually close this out and we will go to the, hang on, excuse me, I had to restart my computer having wonderful internet and lag issues. All right. So anybody, thanks Jackie, thanks for letting me know that you're in WSET, and we've got Denver who's in Macau. I think he might get our longest commute award for this class, being a long way away. And so in a little while, as I replied to Jackie, in about week 6 or 7, I will propose either a Monday session or even a special session to talk about how to apply this information and these materials into studying for Master of Wine WSET type courses. Okay, so we will do that. All right, Tara had emailed me these questions, and I asked her to post them, which I appreciate greatly. And this is the perfect way to do this. So well done, Tara. So what she did was she had a number of questions, and we've got them here. So I'm just going to go through. You'll see some of my responses down below, and I'll refer to them. So number one, she's asking about my comment that French market is a disaster right now, and what are the factors that contributed to this. And these are very complex situations, and something I watch very closely. Let me open up all the comments here that were, view 3 more comments. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here's what you can do in your own independent study. And again, the wine enthusiast in us will look at France and look at their culture, and we hear the stories and we hear partial truths about the traditions and what's going on. But the reality is it's a mess. and here's what's going on. You can see that since the early 1950s, there's been a decline in per liter of alcohol per capita. Now, data can be tricky, and graphs can be can misrepresent certain things. And the interesting thing is what's misrepresented in this graph is actually the volume of wine per capita, which is even worse than this graph represents. So notice that we're looking at the Journal of Wine Economics, and this is the American Academy of Wine Economics, by the way. It's a really great organization and a great resource for a lot of data, a lot of studies from all around the world in all sorts of topics pertaining not only well, mostly focused on wine economics. So you're not reading papers necessarily about yeast clones and genetics and all that kind of stuff, but what's going on in the world of economics. All right. So very highly recommended to go to that site and see what kind of resources are available. So what we're looking at in this is in liter of alcohol per capita. All right. So as far as wine is concerned, you're seeing about a 66% decline from wine as expressed in liters per capita, not volume of wine per capita. And here's why it's misleading. Back in the 50s and well into the 60s, very rarely did the vast majority of French wine exceed 12 or 13% alcohol. And that was even allowing for the chaptalization or adding of sugar to what we would consider unripe grapes today. All right. So chaptalization is the use of glucose. It could be liquid glucose. It might just be, cane sugar that's added to the grapes before fermentation begins. Okay. And back in this era, up in through here, the actual volume of consumption was much higher because alcohol was much lower. Hope that makes sense to you. And in fact, in France and in Italy and pretty much in Spain, you're seeing on this graph that consumption has gone down 66%, but from a volume standpoint, data shows that it's actually consumption of wine in France is down catastrophically, like 85% in actual volume, 85%. Now you take a country that in the 70s, over 10% of the entire workforce of France was involved in some way, shape, or form with the wine business. It could have been in equipment and barrels and all sorts of other ancillary businesses. But this decline has been just devastating. And then the question becomes why? Well, a number of different things. And you can see that alcohol consumption per capita has not changed all that dramatically. A little bit for beer, and liquor's been pretty much steady. But the two of these, beer went from nothing and came up. But that's not what's accounting for this big shift. What's accounting for the big shift is rampant alcoholism, and the French government started to crack down on drunk driving and the social cost that of alcoholism in their country. And so this goes back to another myth that, wine is the beverage of moderation, and where there's wine, there is no alcoholism. That was Thomas Jefferson with not a direct quote, but very much along those lines. And so there was this idea, the kids grow up on on wine and they don't get drunk like American kids or whatever. But actually binge drinking in France by teenagers and so forth is worse in France than it is in the United States. So the other thing is the wine industry tends to gloss over reality and paint an unrealistic picture of how, of wine in the French lifestyle and in their culture. All right. And some of the other things that haven't been studied, but are part of a larger study that I'm involved in, and this is the migration of consumers away from wine due to the complexity and this idea that you need to be educated and that people are too stupid to know what they like, and this kind of thing. And we'll get to this very deeply in the very last week. But consider that up until the 80s and 90s and so forth, wine was simple in France. The French people did not know a lot about wine. They just didn't. It was what you had. It grew locally. You went down to the co-op. Depending on your budget, you would fill up your own container. It's called selling wine en vrac, V-R-A-C, vrac. And it's basically you go to the co-op or to a winery, and it's literally like an old gas pump, and you pick the quality level you can afford that used to be determined mostly by alcohol level, and you fill up your container and you go home. And then you fill from there into a pitcher at lunch or into a bottle that you take to work or out in the fields and so on and so forth. So one of the other things that has happened is wine has become so expensive and so specialized. And the other thing is that it is no longer okay to drink sweet wine. The ridicule and the disenfranchisement that American consumers are faced with, the French are faced with. And again, the misinformation, oh, Americans like wine because they grew up on Coca-Cola. Well, that's all just BS, okay? The French loved sweet wines. They always drank sweet wines. And 100 years ago, it was very common for French champagne from the Champagne region of France that was made by the Champagne method, etc. Very frequently, those wines were 30% sweeter than Coca-Cola, okay? So the history and the tradition, I implore everybody in this class, learn more about the reality behind all these stories and all these myths and this BS, okay? So that's what's going on back here, all right? All right. So the next thing that Tara asked was about the District 4 in the California Grape Crush Report, huge number of transactions, and is there any way to understand which prices were influenced by year versus reputation of the grower? No, but if you actually go in and look at the transactions and then think more critically and think a little more differently, Tara's initial thoughts are correct. You know, well, was this purchase a low reputation or a low quality, you know, sort of fringe vineyard? There's not much of that left in the Napa Valley, by the way. Or was it in the spot market? So these kind of things show a really great level of thought process into why those prices can be so different, all right? And it's hard to tell from any individual transaction, with the exception to go in and look at the size of the transactions, because a lot of times it'll be a winery or a larger wine company that has full-time, constantly in the vineyard negotiators that are working to establish the grape contracts, the spot market opportunities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? So it's not possible to tell who was each transaction, but you can start to surmise, okay, at the lower end, these must be longer term transactions. And remember that also many times the transactions are recorded. If a winery is growing its own grapes, it has to create a transaction of the grapes and kind of sell it to themselves, all right? So that's important to know. All right, this was one of my favorites, and that was, excuse me, let me do it this way. how do you get a sense of how important classic blends versus obscure blends, or Napa versus generic California or lesser regions? How important is that to the market? Well, you don't know until you start to research the market. So, and this can be very hard. And one of the ways to do this, if you get a chance during this class, when you're in a grocery store and you see somebody kind of perusing a section, ask a consumer what they think. If you know any friends that like red blends, and they might be passionate about one or the other. So the importance of a classic blend versus an obscure blend lies in the market segment itself, and of course people that place a lot of value on terroir and origin and classic tradition of like Bordeaux blends and Rhone blends and so forth. You can usually create a greater aura or perception of quality if you position and market the wine correctly. Then you might try to tell the story about an obscure blend. Okay. The other thing is, maybe the market that you're selling to doesn't care that much, but when you're trying to make your distributor placement, when you're trying to impress critics, when you are hoping and praying the retail buyer in the stores and the restaurant buyers and so forth, they may have much more of a sense of importance than the market, and then you've got to take that into consideration also. Okay, so hopefully that does. All right, the next question was pertaining to the slide that was showing the differential between bulk wine prices and grapes themselves. Okay, now first of all, very frequently when you can vertically integrate a product, meaning, okay, well, I'm growing the grapes, now I'm going to add production to that so that we've got finished wine. Okay, that's classic vertical integration. It's not necessarily the demand is higher, because at some points the demand is lower for the bulk wine than for the grape prices. But consider that when the harvest is going on, now you're talking the raw material, there may be high demand and high prices, and because of that, you will typically then have a period where the demand for grapes is high, but then the demand for the bulk wine is going down. Okay, and so because of the cycles are kind of at different points of production, is why you get this intersection, if you will, of high demand for the grapes, lower demand for bulk wine. But then once the grapes, when it shifts, then all of a sudden people can't get the grapes, and so they're looking in the bulk wine market and they need to supply it. So it's just kind of interesting, because what you've done is you've extended out your own. Let's say that we're going to make 50-50 bulk wine and sell grapes for 2019. All right, so we're preparing for this year's crush, and we're starting to notice that grape prices are going to soften, and that things are kind of shifting in the market for the grapes. So as that demand is lowering, the demand for the bulk wine is going to be rising, and so will the prices, and you'll be able to look into classified ads and so forth to see this phenomenon. Okay. All right. And then the final thing is, and this is really good because risk versus reward, and I said I would cover this tonight. Spot market is offering grapes without contract. Now, a contract might be written to cover certain things sort of last minute, but the spot market is, I'm going to wait until as late as possible and then see if that puts me in a better negotiating position for getting lower prices on the grapes. All right, so that's what the spot market is. And it's a risk and reward scenario. If you were looking for spot market over the past couple years, the demand for grapes have been high. The supply has been on the lower side because we were in a growth cycle, okay? But the things are shifting now. And so it's actually going to improve the opportunity for spot market perhaps in 2019, meaning the wineries are going to be looking at consumption data and trends, and it shows that things are kind of leveling off. So if I'm a producer, I'm going to get a little bit more conservative with my production numbers. I'll get more conservative with my estimates for how much grapes I'm going to use. And I might even see if I could back out of some contracts if I'm a little heavy. And so I'm going to use less grapes. Let me see if I can turn my video back on. It just feels weird talking into the air. Hang on. Just a second. All right, let's try this again. All right, I'm gesticulating and you can't see that. All right. So over the past few years, demand has been high and there's been less available on the spot market. All right. And then we're coming into a vintage where a lot of the wineries are going to be pulling back their production estimates and their grape needs. And that means more grapes will be available on the spot market. So what you can anticipate in 29, and we'll see if it's true or not, 2019, I expect, because of the data coming out and also because of global dynamics, that demand is going to diminish for grapes, the prices will diminish, and then people who are playing the spot market can go in and get their grapes for a lot less, all right, because people will be reneging on contracts or trying to reduce their volumes, okay? So then if I determine I'm going to make 50% of my grapes into wine, then that's not going to be ready for a while. And hopefully the market's going to shift in that, and then I'll get more for my bulk wine, but I'm going to have to wait a little bit longer. And then hopefully the grape prices will stabilize and it'll do its little dance. I'll put that graphic back up on here, okay? So that's kind of how it works in the supply and the demand end of it. Then if you go into your spreadsheet server, and if I look at this, just using the basic data, we're making 3,000 cases at 133 FOB, and I decide to play the spot market, okay? So the first thing I want to do is get these so that there's only 100%. So right now I'm paying $21.50 a grape, but for my grapes, let's say that I'm going to do the spot market just with this, and I'm able to go out and make offers and say, hey, look, I need Cabernet Sauvignon. Here's the specifications. Here's the ripeness level. Here's the quality I'm looking for. And if for this little wine, it's only 3,000 cases, but I'm making a gross margin of $92,600. If I can get those same grapes for $1,800, all right, and boom, I just made $18,000 on a small basis. Now and again, this is what I want you to be doing with this program. But yeah, but that's no biggie. What if this was a 50,000 case project? All right. And then let's go back in the grape costs, and I'm going to go back. If I was $2,500 for my grapes, all right, you can see my margin is $1,561,000. If I go to $1,800, it's $300,000. It's a very significant difference. And especially if I could do the same thing for the Merlot and get a few $100 knocked off of that, that's about a $400,000 shift. Okay, so this is really big business, and the business of grapes is an imperative to understand. Okay, so just a real quick recap. Think of sort of global dynamics. What's going to happen in the EU with Brexit and with EU wines in the UK market and French wines, Italian wines, if that whole thing becomes even more of a mess and collapses, okay? So lots of things pushing and pulling and shaping how things go, from going out and seeing if you can get your grapes on the cheap. Now again, the risk on this, if I think, wow, this is great, I'm going to do this every year, in 2020 I might not have enough grapes, and so it could be that I built my business plan on a false premise. So things like the spot market, you've got to be able to mitigate the risk of your business and make smart decisions over a long period of time. It's not just a once-off. That being said, when surpluses start to back up, all right, when bulk wine starts to build up in inventory and the prices start to go down, and that's usually because the market's softening and because consumption is down, that's when a lot of brands get started. Because now somebody who's really smart and savvy can swoop in, purchase a lot of bulk wine for pennies on the dollar, start a brand, but the question comes, can they maintain, can they keep that, all right? And we're going to start talking about that bulk wine business, but also on Wednesday we're going to look at a whole spectrum of how does blending existing material, how does that look for Chateau Lafite, Rothschild, Latour, Opus One, Grange in Australia, but also what does it mean for Yellowtail and Franzia and that kind of stuff, all right? Because everybody's playing, in this area of finance and business, but it looks different depending on the business model, the type of product, the price range, and so forth. Okay, so that's going to wrap us up. And Wednesday, hopefully, we'll have some people on. We're going to launch into what a lot of people find the most fun period. I'm going to give you everything you need to conduct a wine blending and to do the finances of your wine blending. So that's most people that are into wine have run into the wine blending thing at a winery or an event or so on, but we're going to put dollars and cents behind it. Okay, so thank you guys so much, and we will be in communication on Wednesday again. Bye.